Welcome to the Navik Gaming Podcast, where it is our mission to explore the business and future of video games. We bring together the industry's brightest builders, investors, and thinkers to keep a pulse on current events, dissect emerging trends in games, share lessons learned, and have a great time. This podcast is also part of Navik's growing ecosystem, which ranges from free and premium research to consulting and advisory services. For more information, visit www.navik.co. Now, let's jump into the episode. This episode is brought to you by Coda Payments. Free-to-play game monetization can be a weary endeavor for game developers, especially for publishers of multiple titles. I'm here with Neil Davidson, Executive Chairman of Coda Payments. Neil, why should games teams look to Coda Payments to solve their payments needs?
Last year, the two major app stores collected more than $30 billion in fees from mobile game developers. Coda helps developers collect some of their revenues outside the app stores, keeping more of the income they generate for themselves. We offer a set of solutions that allow developers to collect payments on the web, either on a website that they operate or on one that we do. Either way, players can choose from a range of more than 300 payment methods in 64 territories. We help some of the biggest mobile game developers in the world generate more net revenue, and we'd love to help your listeners do the same.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing, Neil. And if you, our listener, want to see how Coda Payments can help solve your monetization needs, head to codapayments.com or check out the details in the show notes. And with that, let's jump into the weekly roundtable.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Navik Roundtable. I'm your host, Devin Becker, and I'm, of course, joined by great panelists as always. On this time, we've got Manu, co-founder of Navik, who I'm sure you've seen plenty of times. Also, Tammy Levy, Chief Games Officer, still best title, at Captain.tv. And we've got David Kaye, President of Snapshot Games and angel investor. Always nice to have around. Guardian angel investor, hopefully. How are you guys doing today?
Doing good.
Yeah.
Yep, doing good.
Good.
Everyone
Ready to go. Yeah.
Awesome. We've got a lot of topics to cover today. A lot of like small things and maybe some big things that we'll dig into. Just a lot of stuff with just starting with some simple stuff around Q1 earnings results for Huuuge Games, some game growth in the MENA region, and then into Supercell with their kind of double beta release they've gone out with. EA interestingly doing NFTs with Nike. We've got some stuff with the SEC in Web3 that should be fun to dig into. And then, of course, everyone's topic du jour lately, Apple and their Apple Vision Pro headset. So some fun stuff going on there. Why don't we just dig right into what's going on with the Q1 results for Huuuge with many U's games?
Yep. Huuuge Games with huge headlines, essentially, with these results. So, I think I saw the article kind of floating around on Pocket Gamer, and the headline basically was the highest EBITDA margin ever that they have seen. So, of course, it got me a little bit curious to, what the hell happened in that company, because I've looked into Huuuge before, and primarily a casino slots portfolio, and given today's IDFA climate, a casino slots portfolio returning the highest EBITDA margins in their history got me curious. So, basically, I think the story is like relatively simple. Their revenues were down, but the reason that their EBITDA margin was so high was because they just cut back on a lot of UA spend. So, it just increased profitability at the end. And so, it was basically a PR headline, but, for a portfolio that is kind of heavily dependent on, casino titles and such, like cutting back on UA spend is a pretty big, red flag in some ways. Just to kind of maybe go over the numbers very quickly, their overall revenue was down about 14.5%, and this is in Q1. So it landed up at about 51 million over there. That was mostly driven by, their core franchise revenues being down by 8%, and also the sunsetting of one game called Traffic Puzzle, which resulted in, this 14.5% revenue drop. and yeah, in terms of spending, they just cut down their UA spend quite significantly because, I mean, they were very transparent about the UA climate being quite hard, and they're just trying to find their footing essentially. Like, um, how do they do UA in this new world, and they don't want to be throwing good money after bad in a way, and just try to like take their time to figure it out. At the end of the day, it's still a pretty healthy company in terms of cash balance. They're regularly quarter over quarter increasing their cash balance slowly, so they have like that flexibility to experiment and take their time on the UA side of things. But yeah, that was the whole cutting back of UA spend on a dropping revenue um, trajectory was, kind of the key reason why the EBITDA was so crazily up. I guess while thinking about this, I've kind of like told this story multiple times across earnings. I started to feel like even Playtika has like a similar story to some extent. I mean, not the record EBITDA margins, but aging portfolio, cutting back on UA spend, and a lot of other public mobile gaming companies are also like in a similar place. And I was just wondering, like, a question to you guys. Everyone is like quite worried about the marketing environment right now and how they should like continue to do marketing into the future, but I see less companies actually talking about how they should be maybe building like more focus on the product side. How should they be thinking about products actually in the future? And because I mean, until now, most games have been just built with that, like, everyone kind of knew that they had UA as a lever to juice, and then most games would just be like copies of like other successful games with like plus one innovations on those, and like some more live op juicing. But it mostly then came down to UA strategy in terms of who's able to target better, who's able to apply the fake ads strategies better, and essentially kind of get their users like that. But when that growth lever has gone, I guess the question is like, should people also more studios be talking about how to build their games differently? And
I have.
so yeah,
All right, I'm gonna.
yeah.
I could push back a little on this.
Mhm.
Not push back exactly, but offer some color perhaps, because I think it's quite easy to. There's a lot of companies pushing a sort of a narrative of the UA environment is impossible and blah blah and so on and so on. But I know a number of founders who are actually having a lot of success in the current user acquisition environment. And I think like one of the fun things about the games this is not unique to the games industry, but one of the nice things about this ecosystem is as soon as like something becomes kind of part of the received wisdom, right? That actually it can start to create opportunity for people who for people who sort of take the opposite tack. Because I mean UA particularly, right? Okay, if all these big companies are switching off UA, what impact is that going to have? Well, it's going to reduce demand and it's going to create pockets of opportunity for other developers. So like I know a couple of developers, particularly right now, who are maybe they're not the same scale, but they are scaling very successfully in their niches. And maybe the fact that some of these larger companies that were previously able to throw huge amounts of money at things, scaling back is actually creating that opportunity.
I mean, is that due to the niches as well? Like, obviously, the more competitive the particular genre, things like that, the particular audience, that's obviously going to create high demand, even with people scaling back, right? But situations where it's like, hey, this niche is like relatively untapped, or people weren't spending tons on UA in this particular genre. I mean, do you think that's some of it, David, or is it because you said you've seen others successfully scaling? Is that in very competitive genres, or is that just like them being
the ones I'm thinking of without naming names, I mean, one of the genres is word games. The other one is in the puzzle category, I suppose, broadly.
I think I know
Yeah,
the one
that's-
you're talking about in the word games. I mean, based on
In the
LinkedIn.
games, yeah, I know. Based on LinkedIn, I
Yeah,
think
based
we
on
can put
LinkedIn.
the
Everyone's
thing on
stalking
our
you,
heads.
David. Sorry.
But
Yeah, okay.
yeah, no, I actually want to bring light to another piece on the earnings report here, because I do agree with David in that there's kind of like a very polarizing piece right now in terms of user acquisition of, hey, it's really hard, versus, hey, let's figure this out and find the pockets of opportunity. And you kind of start seeing a little bit of Huuuge Games teasing the, hey, we want to find the new opportunity, but with new games, which I found a little bit, like, I found interesting how they were positioning it, thinking about multiplayer, multi-platform, and they tease this piece of building pods for rapid prototyping and releasing games. So kind of almost like placing it in the Supercell model. And I think that they did that very intentionally so that they can kill games and don't get any frowns. And the first piece of it seemed interesting to me, and I was intrigued by what they were talking about in terms of trying just to understand kind of a different market. It does move them completely into a different niche from what they've done, because they've found success in social casino. So there's also kind of this question that a lot of teams and game studios, there's this one side of like conventional wisdom of stick to what you know and refine what you know, and they're kind of going against that. And then there's the other piece of, hey, try to diversify, and that's what they're trying to do here. But what I found interesting as well is like that seemed like very focused. But I found kind of weird was that they had this piece where they threw all the keywords at their earnings report with building AI across, like leveraging AI across the organization, exploring M&A in partnerships, um, new business
Yep.
models with Web3 space. So it felt like very focused, and then right after that, completely out of focus. And I think that speaks to a little bit of it's some teams are struggling to find that focus and where to find that opportunity in today's market.
Yeah. I mean, just for the record, I think like Huuuge Game it's probably like a really good acquisition target at this point. It really feels like in the same bucket as a Rovio right now. But just kind of going back to my point about, this, like should maybe companies think about products differently. I agree with what you said, David, that yes, there are like pockets of opportunity created when the bigger companies are not in the race anymore in a way. But it's also that also feels like maybe there's some of the short term pockets that, yes, if you can exploit it, okay, great, but like more long term, like what's the approach over here? And like Huuuge Games, taking the example again, but they mentioned like one of the strategies that they're applying is, instead of focusing on the more performance marketing strategy, going more in the brand marketing route. But I mean, like creating brands from a established portfolio and from games that were built with keeping UA in mind is a very, very like, it's a hard hill to climb. It's sometimes, I mean, mostly probably almost impossible. Then I mean, they could maybe like go the personalization route, and I'm just going through like some inorganic growth methods. So they could go the personalization route in terms of personalizing the game experience itself, but that's also expensive to build. They can go the exploiting SK ad network route, but that's it's kind of proven to be a slightly low ROI space. And I mean, the whole point of SK ad network is not to kind of allow the old UA world to exist. Or they can even go like the cheap tricks route, but that's all like the fake ads and whatnot. But that's like all short term strategies. So it really feels like the pressure is on like the more organic growth side of things, for for mobile studios, which would be, first of all, like creating a fun game experience, or creating, going back to, the more 2010, 2013 wisdom of, viral loops and such during the Facebook era. And I was really thinking about, like, I think it was Supercell's CEO who said in his blog post that innovation in game design is probably going to be one of the biggest problems that the free-to-play space will see going into the next 10 years. And maybe he said it for different reasons, but like when I try to think about this problem from that angle, it really started to ring true even for me, because like I don't know if like games can continue to just like copy each other, and then I mean they can't apply the UA tactics anymore that they had, and like +1 iterations is no more enough, and even the word game studio that David is referring to, I mean their game, it is a drop of innovation in the word game space, which maybe is contributing to their scaling abilities at that point. So, but yeah. I'm curious.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
what do you guys think? Like, do you
yeah, like newsflash, like it really helps if you can make good creative games that bring something different to the table.
Yeah.
Like this is only news in like mobile. Like this is not something, hop over to Steam. There's like 1,000 games with like novel mechanics and doing interesting stuff like get released every day almost. And so, yeah, I mean, God forbid we have to do something a little different, create something new.
To be fair, Valve actually puts a lot of effort into discoverability, whereas Apple could seem to care less, and
you're absolutely right.
Pay for their advertising, right? So I feel like there's also like one of the things we're not really kind of touching on a lot is just kind of the other environmental stuff going on that isn't directly related in terms of like both like easy money drying up, meaning like it's less smart now margin wise, and what Huuuge was saying in terms of just throwing money at the problem. Instead now, as David's saying, you actually, I don't know, maybe you have to think about making a good game or making your creatives better or whatever it is to make it so that it's more worth your money rather than just being like, it's easy money. Let's just hit the scale lever and go over. Plus we've got the backlash from COVID going back the other way, right?
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. It's a fair point. The environment and the incentives are going to dictate the behavior of everyone in the market. And the story of mobile for the last decade plus has been just massive user growth. And so you're going to take the most efficient route to that, which is okay. We don't need to innovate that much because there are all these tailwinds. And there's an environment where we can sort of scale quite effectively, and the whole thing works really, really well. And you're right. Also, a big difference between Steam and the App Store is that Steam does a relatively good job of pushing discoverability even for newer developers, whereas Apple has basically taken a hatchet to both the paid and organic discovery in their ecosystem. And that's why a lot of people are having a hard time.
Well, hopefully this all just results in pressure to make better stuff, right? Like let's hope this is actually a great thing for the industry. Just
or copying games from Steam on mobile.
Yeah, maybe we'll see that trend, right? We did see a trend the other way for a while too, where I think I saw a lot of games trying to come over from mobile to Steam, like trying to do the opposite, right? Like trying to apply that, and obviously that audience tends to reject a lot of that. So I don't know.
I actually think, I mean, like this is like super speculation, but I actually think Habi is doing that strategy. Just looking at, so the guys behind Archero, I mean, just looking at like innovative mechanics on the Steam side and then creating mobile free-to-play versions of it on the mobile side. It happened with Archero, like based on Binding of Isaac. It happened with Survivor.io based on Vampire Survivors. And I think like one of their more recent games is also a copy of some Steam hit. So
nothing wrong with that if it's just helping cross genres, or cross platforms.
Yeah,
And I wouldn't fault them. I wouldn't necessarily fault them for doing that, because there's also
I'm with
okay,
David.
there's no
I'm with
innovation
David.
there.
Just based on his
No, I
take.
mean seriously, I mean, this has been going on for like more or less the entire history of the App Store. Like, there's a lot of very high profile cases of this going on. 2048 was a big one.
Yeah.
There was also, what was that game that ripped off Spry Fox's game? You know what I'm talking about?
I think it was from like 6 Waves or something like that. They copied that.
Yeah, I mean,
the merge stuff.
This
became its whole thing.
It's why like a lot of
Triple Bears or
Triple Town.
Triple Town. Yeah, Triple Town.
The Kindle game of all things, actually.
Yeah, nobody gives credit to, I think, Spryfox for kind of innovating that merge mechanic. So yeah,
Poor
right.
guys. They were definitely about pushing new genres and then getting ripped off in doing so.
But yeah, sorry, Tammy, you're going to say something.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I was just going to say, it's like I don't fault them for that, and I think that it's actually two very different. I feel like two very different skills that some teams have both skills, but not every team has both skills of finding a fun gameplay, like moment-to-moment core gameplay mechanic that can really engage players, building a metagame on top of it that can monetize. Like those two, like not every team has both. And that's where we see kind of these examples of a team can innovate on a super fun, interesting mechanic, but they don't find kind of like this huge success. Then another team grabs that mechanic, puts a loop on top of it. Of course, they do it with quality and whatnot, but they get that out there, and it does much better than the original game without even like innovating on the mechanics.
Yeah.
And that's the marketing engine at work, right? You don't have to out innovate. You just have to like do your research and out compete on the marketing level.
Outspend them.
Yeah. But at least, hey, if the pressure is on for doing a better job with UA, then all the better for them to actually have to put a little more effort into it, I would think, right? Like, it's just a more competitive industry, but not a dead one, right? Like, in terms of, you could, as David points out, you could still acquire users. You just have to put more effort into it and stop just relying on like the kind of easy approach. So yeah, like I said, maybe this will be good for the industry as a whole. I hope.
I think so.
Try to look on the bright side of it here.
Yeah, I'm like really like more optimistic than pessimistic, but yeah, I mean, creating fun game concepts it is the hardest thing to do. So, but yeah.
That's fine. We'll have AI do it for us, right? We'll just have it start prototyping games just in the background constantly. And then it'll have to have AI testing the games for you too as well to let you know if they're good.
Probably AI playing it also, AI spending everything.
Yeah, exactly. But speaking of a region that is actually growing and not necessarily struggling with user acquisition the same way is the MENA region. Of course, the Middle East and I believe North Africa is what the N stands for there?
Yep.
Yeah.
So there was a report from the Dubai Multi-Commodity Center released, kind of just talking about where the region's at in terms of the consumer side and the gaming, like consumer side and gamer side. Because we've talked a lot about, and we've kind of been keeping an eye on the development side, just with Scopely getting scooped up by Savvy Games, which is in the region in Dubai. But yeah, so looking at the consumer side, they forecasted the region reaching $6 billion by 2027. And this really is focused on, the big share of it is focused on 3 countries, Saudi Arabia being a huge one, the United Arab Emirates and Egypt. And also in terms of gamers and just, the consumer side growth, not only the revenue growth, they've forecasted somewhere around 85 million gamers in 2025. So the number itself, 6 billion, it's a big number, but it's, when you look at the global gaming industry, it's not that impressive. But what it is impressive is the rate of growth, which is kind of forecasted at double from 2021, and that's especially compared with the global growth forecasted. So whether the exact numbers and data forecasted is accurate, I didn't get a chance to dig into specifically the data sources for how they're forecasting this, but I do think it is worth keeping an eye on this growth, because especially and specifically Saudi Arabia has kind of like this big strategy. They're calling it Vision 2030 to diversify outside of oil as kind of their their thing. And in general, they just want a bigger piece of everything, and that includes gaming. So they want a bigger piece of the gaming pie. They want to become a global gaming hub, and this comes from both the consumer side and the development side. And I think that if anyone can wield this into existence, when there's countries or strategies like these published or released, there's skepticism around can you actually make it happen, because you have to have a coherent strategy. The benefit that Saudi Arabia has is that they have tons of money. They have deep pockets to invest in building game studios, creating local content, and also betting big on kind of all fronts, from esports festivals, like all of the things. So I think that's kind of very interesting, and I think what really caught my attention as I was kind of reading through a lot of the things that are happening, I think what exemplifies this, approach of hitting it from all angles is the event that they're putting up in June, called the Dubai Esports and Game Festival, where they're calling it a gaming extravaganza, and they're really going all out. Like, it really is an extravaganza. They have esports tournaments. They have a game expo very much in the vein of PAX. They have Pocket Gamer coming over and, organizing their Game Expo Summit. They have a festival called Play Beyond, very much in the vein of DreamHack. And even other events like a Minecraft educational challenge for, I think it's like middle schoolers. So a competition. So they're hitting all age groups, all angles, developers, consumers, esports, players, fans. Like, it's just everything. So it's a very interesting, strategy. They're just throwing and going after everything. But
Yep.
of course,
The strategy is spend.
yeah, they're like, I want
spend money.
everything. Let me throw money.
Yep.
User acquisition,
but-
okay?
Yeah, no, we all wish we had like deep pockets like that, right? That would solve the acquisition problems that we're talking about. But yeah, I think what's interesting too is every announcement that they make is met with skepticism, especially given Saudi Arabia's track record when it comes to human rights in general. So it'll be interesting to see how it evolves over time. But I don't know if you guys have had a chance to follow a lot of movement there, and whether it's from like developer side or the consumer side, and have any additional thoughts on what's happening in the region.
Yeah, I think in like a previous podcast, I covered Savvy Games Group, because it was like the new name on the scene, and and they came with so much of money and everything, and of course it like popped up a lot of years. And I think during that time, during that podcast, I also just kind of broke down, okay, there's this the public investment fund that's behind this entire initiative, which connects back to the crown prince and all the oil money and things like that. And I think they're like the amount of money that they have, I think the stat I shared in that podcast, just remembering, but I think it was equivalent to like 10 or 15 A16Zs or something like that. It's like really, really a lot of money that, they are, that they have to invest in, specifically in games. but yeah, I also don't know like how much I would like trust that, that report, like if it was from some Dubai association, because I mean they're basically peddling their own agenda a little bit, but
Slightly
um
biased.
yeah, slightly biased, yeah. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I mean, the whole esports stuff. I mean, they're basically isn't ESL now, ESL and the whole Face It
ESL
group.
and Face It were both
Yep,
bought
yep,
by that. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so
So
they have facelift, they have ESL, and ESL had merged with DreamHack. So
yep,
basically, like all the big names.
yeah. So kind of putting that whole acquisition to use, I guess, with this esports extravaganza. But but yeah, I mean, I guess the thing that like maybe just I don't know, the thing I'm like just skeptical about is just the potential size of this market, more from a consumer standpoint, because it's not like the games did not exist for this market before, right? From a mobile standpoint, and all those games did exist. There were enough of spending opportunities for it and such. So, I mean, unless they're like paying people to play games, I don't.
I wouldn't put that beyond with their strategy. That form of user acquisition, right, where it's an incentivized play, right? We saw that Web3, for example.
Reverse user acquisition.
Yeah, non-crypto play to earn.
Yeah, these like those I don't know, I think in some countries there were these during COVID, some countries gave out these the checks, right, for the spending. So now there are like some gaming checks coming out from that region. But yeah, unless like I don't know, like if the games existed before, no one was really spending at that point. So from a consumer spending standpoint, like what's really changed? I mean, I guess like some of building the gaming culture, I guess, is maybe what they're trying to do with all this spending, and maybe over the long term it really changes the trajectory of the market, but it feels like a very slow moving growth grind kind of a thing.
Well, I have a question around that then for you guys in terms of, is there something that they're unlocking here as well? Like, I mean, we're talking about the money side of things, but was there some environmental thing that they were able to take advantage of, like pent up demand, or like more games starting to have servers in that region, for example, or more developers? Like, for example, I know it's not part of MENA, like except for tangentially, but like I've seen, it seems like a lot more developers in Turkey. Like, is there other factors that maybe are being unlocked by this as opposed to just buying growth?
From what I can tell, I think I would take a bet that it's more on what Manu is touching on, which is creating a gaming culture that didn't exist before. So not necessarily unlocking, it kind of is unlocking the gaming, like the consumer space, by creating and bringing awareness about like gaming as an industry. I mean, you see them doing that with sports, with all sorts of um, cultural entertainment, basically. So I think that it's probably more of almost kind of spotlighting to their consumers where to spend their money in a way, and like where should they be kind of focusing. But yeah, I think what's going to be more interesting, I don't know that there's a lot of growth there from the consumer side, outside of kind of just reaching their full potential. What will be interesting to me is definitely the um developer side. Like, they're trying to really bring in that revenue and grow that revenue, and own part of the
Global
profits
market. Yeah.
of gaming and the global market. And I think that will definitely shape uh, the industry in some way, because they already have hands in so many big companies. Like, they've invested in Nintendo, in EA, in Take-Two. Like, they're going at it.
Well, good. Well, hopefully that it leads to innovation and not just spending that on easy money user acquisition, right? So we don't end up with just a repeat of the typical mobile industry. But in terms of growth in regions and things like that, and kind of spreading out, Supercell and their sort of dual beta strategy that they've been going with recently has been interesting.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys had a chance to play Supercell's latest betas. So kind of just as a opener here, um, they have 3 games in testing. Clash Mini that is live in their regular kind of soft launch markets. But additional to that, they have 2 games that they're opening on limited betas. One being Squad Busters, and the other one being Flood Rush. So a brief kind of what these games are about, just so we can talk a lot about them a little bit more. But they're both. What's very interesting is that they're both very similar in terms of the type of game, the genre, the mechanics, like what they would be going after. They're both in this battle royale space, kind of simplified battle royale where you're playing async PvP with a bunch of players in the same arena or world. You're navigating this world, finding whether enemies or other players to battle, or chests and rewards to build your party during the match to reach a final stage. So kind of they both follow that general arc, and they launched back to back. They did a week of closed beta for Squad Busters, and the day that they finished, the next day they got Flood Rush out the door as well. What's interesting to me is that, they're back to back, but it kind of rags my brain a little bit, because you could say, hey, they're trying to compare, compare, put them next to each other, compare how they perform, and kill one, because Supercell's going to kill games.
I came to the same thought. Like I came to the same conclusion. And I actually I thought they were more like trying to casualize the MOBA space more than the battle royale. But yeah, you go. I can come back to that later.
Yeah. I'll just say, like, what's puzzling about this whole thing to me is that it feels intentional, but then when you start thinking about it, it feels less intentional in some ways. Because if you were going to put them against each other, you would effectively need to have similar conditions. So you would need to, Squad Busters is a closed beta. Flood Rush, they did an open. You can just go and during that time frame play it. For Squad Busters, you had to get in the allow list for the closed beta. They did completely different regions for both games. So Squad Busters, they went with Canada, Mexico, and Spain. With Flood Rush, they went with Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, and I think UK. So those, we know that those regions all behave very different. And even kind of going into a little bit more kind of nitty gritty points, Squad Busters is in their second beta, so it's been in development longer and it's more baked than Flood Rush. So that's a part that was puzzling to me about kind of this situation that we're seeing with Supercell. So yeah, Manu, you had thoughts about this Supercell strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like for me, the comparative test was I was more thinking about it from the product side of it, because it almost felt to me like Flood Rush is, yeah, basically, I mean, it's slightly different in terms of Squad Busters gameplay, but pretty close, I would say. But it's basically like Squad Busters without all the Supercell, the Supercell IP characters in it, and without the roguelike card mechanic in it, and then that's Flood Rush. So like it really felt like
it's simpler, and even like they go with like portrait versus landscape, right? So Flood Rush is portrait, so you could potentially like play single hand, versus Squad Busters, which is landscape.
Yeah, and like the one thing that added like gameplay depth or strategic depth to Squad Busters was the roguelike card mechanic. And now if you remove it from the gameplay, I mean, I just didn't see the depth in, Flood Rush itself. Like, I mean, you go in with like some random character, and you have your 3 cards, you collect your mana, and then you use the 3 cards. And I didn't really, I watched like I didn't get to play myself, but I just watched like multiple streamers play it, and I really did not see any kind of strategic depth. And if you like kind of compare it to the strategic depth of gameplay in a Clash Royale, I mean, it's nowhere close, like nowhere close. So I don't know, like it started to feel to me like, are they testing, like is it a test between products in some way, or I don't know. This one also just did not feel like that Supercell level game at the end of it, but no.
It seemed like instead of an A/B test, it's like a ACE test versus a DF test, like where they're just like, we'll have one thing in common between these 2 things, and then everything else will be different. The launch strategy will be different. The territories will be different. The like a lot of the gameplay play mechanics will be different, and then the IP will be completely different and opposite.
So we're
like,
probably wrong about it being a test, I guess.
Let's just testing everything at once, right? They're like, let's test every aspect of this all at the exact same time.
Yeah,
no controls,
sure
nothing.
Is smarter than that, but yeah.
But that's what happened essentially, right? Like new IP versus nothing that's like something that's entirely combined IP, and it's like, and then totally different launch strategies. But it's like also different than the normal launch strategy of like the super long soft launch that I feel like their games like Clash Mini and stuff like that kind of get stuck in that almost soft launch hell. So it almost just seems like this whole thing is them trying to like, let's get out of the rut we're in and just try a couple crazy things at the same time and see what seems to work. I mean, it's going to get them attention either way, I guess.
That just doesn't fit with like how it works inside Supercell, or at least like what I know based on what has been shared at GDC talks or what has been shared through articles, which is the games need to go through internal team approvals, and then the game team also needs to like thumbs up it before it gets into any beta or soft launch. Like, it's a little bit surprising to me that Supercellians are approving this stuff. Like, how is it getting out there? I don't know. That just feels
they've murdered so many games. Some of their children are just trying to escape at this point.
Yeah, they're just like, let them through. No, but yeah, I agree. Like, it does feel like Flood Rush, and I was watching some streams as well for both. It feels like super half baked, which is, it might be trying to test the strategy of testing something half baked. Who knows? We'll see. We'll find out soon enough, because they will kill 1 or 2 games or 3 games that are in testing right now.
I have to say, I did actually play quite a bit of Flood Rush rather than just kind of watch it, just because like I wanted to get the kind of experience. While I would agree on the depth issue, like there definitely is lacking depth, I do think it actually was decently engaging to play. Probably not to watch. And like I would kind of push back that Clash Royale seems deep now, but I would say like when it first came out, it probably didn't have near that feeling of depth. It felt like you just drop guys down and just watch them go at each other. Like, I mean, that's my impression of it. But like, I obviously like there's a little bit of depth to Flood Rush in terms of counterplay, similar to Clash Royale, in terms of like they actually tell you, like they encourage you, like at least on their website, to like hold back on the mana and like actually try and play some counterplay. But I will agree that like it is definitely not near the depth it needs to be.
Yeah.
But I do think there was, if you just watch it, I think it's a little underwhelming compared to trying it. But I do think like, obviously Squad Busters is a little harder to get access to. So it could be a little harder to like test that one to compare it. But I don't know. I don't know if it's either of these will live, to be honest, like at the end of the day, right? Like, because
I don't know what do you guys bet in terms of how many kills and how many will stay alive out of those 3? Is it like 0 to 3 live versus kill, or any other number?
So I played Clash Mini quite a bit as well in the earlier stages of the soft launch, and I think they've done a good job like improving it over time. And it also lacked the depth because single one of these is like, let's simplify, and that creates depth problems. But I do think that one has a good chance of living, assuming they don't prematurely kill it, especially after the stories came out about Brawl Stars and the way that almost got killed and Frank kind of saved it and that sort of thing. So I think that one, yeah. The other 2, I don't know, man. Like maybe sacrifices the Clash mini altar if they just need to
Okay.
go that way.
So one to two. What about you, Tammy?
I think one survives out of the three at most. One at most. And I would say I would go probably higher. I don't know. Think Clash Mini. I'm with Devin on this. I think that it has a lot more to work with, I feel, in terms of also how Supercell understands adding depth to games.
David,
David,
what about
have
you,
you played?
Menu?
I'm going with 0 to 3. Like all three are going to die. Like so.
All three are gonna the chopping block.
I think so. Like I don't know. I just don't see it happening. But I mean, yeah, you guys. If there's a chance of something surviving, maybe it is Clash Mini. And given the history with Brawl Stars and how they were able to turn that thing around, maybe there's a turnaround path for Clash Mini. But I'm still leaning towards 0 to 3.
You gonna go with all three, David, just to be the total contrarian here?
I mean, I'll be honest. I haven't played any of them, but I have recently quit playing Clash Royale after 7 years. So the one thing I will, one thing I will say is I think this is a completely off topic. I don't know. I hate it. To be honest, I'm not going to speculate about stuff that other developers are doing. It's just. You
just got to pick a number now at this point. Go with that.
No, I honestly, I don't feel good talking about what other developers are doing. Sorry.
No, that's fair. That's totally fair.
Yeah. I guess we'll have to revisit this bet, of course, in like maybe a year to really find out, because of how kind of a slow burn it seems like some of their stuff is, unless they really just change that strategy altogether and are gonna like try and kick one of these out the door rather than keep it in soft launch forever. I mean, I doubt that. As you said, the culture has changed that much or anything, but still fun to see, right? Like that they're trying some new strategies for whatever reason they're doing that.
Yep.
And I do think that I do love the Supercell continue to like, man, their quality is so good, and they do try to innovate on, like, whether it's by simplifying deeper games, and I think like they have a focus back to what I was saying, right? It's like focus. They have focus on what they do.
Well, last question on that then. The kind of debate between them just making something that combines all their IP versus doing something that's a new IP. Like, any thoughts on that?
I love the idea of combining IP. I think that there's teams that really have seen success with like leveraging that known IP. It's really hard to get kind of attachment from players these days to new IP, like just building kind of like that emotional attachment. So I think it's a smart bet to combine their IP, because they already have that strong attachment, and I love that idea of the multiverses coming together. So I think that's super smart too.
Yeah. I also think like, being able to like, I mean, they also like I guess the only one IP that maybe doesn't perfectly fit all the other games is Heyday, and kind of like convince Heyday players to come and play like some of this stuff, maybe a hard sell. But all the other IP is essentially kind of operating in the same genre or audience, or in the same audience roughly. So yeah, combining that IP is another it's another great way to just kind of de-risk the organic installs perspective. But yeah, I'm more. I guess the bigger point is just like that whole the multiverses perspective that Tammy shared, which is also exciting. Plus, they get to reuse content, and then and then showcase like character abilities in very different ways, given the core gameplay of different games and such. So it could be like pretty interesting.
It's worked pretty well for Fortnite and Mortal Kombat.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we have a similar thing coming out with X Defiant from Ubisoft, right? Where it's just like let's slap all our stuff together in one thing and hope that helps for at least user acquisition. But on the topic of unexpected strategies and IP, EA and doing NFTs suddenly in terms of like working with Nike.
Yeah. Wait, hold on. I need to like pull up that Kotaku article. One second.
I already feel like this has gone downhill. We're referencing a Kotaku article.
Yeah.
Yeah, a Kotaku article talking about NFTs. So I'm sure it's going to be
Super
highly
positive.
fair and balanced.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I mean, okay, this is maybe like one of the few Kotaku articles. First of all, I don't read Kotaku too much, but general opinion I've heard is like people are not like too, it used to be good, but now it's not good. I don't know where like the industry falls on Kotaku, but this article I felt they were quite cheeky about it, and it kind of jives with my thoughts on the topic of EA coming out with NFTs in June 2023. So the headline goes, the headline of the article is, "It is June 2023 and EA wants to add NFTs to FIFA and Madden." And the subtitle is, "No, you're not reading the date wrong. This is not June 2021. So I think like that kind of like also captured my sentiment around the whole topic a little bit. It feels like, yeah, a little bit late to the whole NFT hype train, and especially given the market conditions. Yeah, I'm not too sure about how, what a launch strategy actually looks like. But to their credit, I think Nike and this like dot swoosh unit, which is Nike's Web3 unit, is also the one sports brand or one of these more like consumer brand uh, Web3 units that's actually seen some significant success in the NFT space. I was checking the numbers on a Dune dashboard, and I believe Nike through its NFT activities has generated something like 200 million in NFT revenue for themselves, which includes primary sales and the royalty revenue generated. And the next, so Adidas is, let me check the numbers. Adidas is at like 10 million. So, and I think after 200 million, the next brand was this, I don't know how you say it, like, is it Dolce and Gabbana? How do you say
Dolce and Gabbana.
Dolce and Gabbana, yeah. And they're at like 25 million. So like, of these,
to add a little context beyond this Kotaku article, I think there's a couple of things worth noting. First, I suspect that Nike acquired a company called Artifact a few years ago, which was a startup that had a lot of success doing NFT. Like they kind of made their own pretty cool looking like sneaker NFTs. So they've got definitely internally some good people who know what they're doing working on this stuff. I will also note that like the two areas where this makes the most sense, like NFTs can make the most sense and have had the most traction, are sports and what I would call really like sneakers, and these are Veblen goods, right? Like these are markets that are driven by luxury and perception and scarcity, and I will say that while the hardcore, if you look at which communities have been most hostile to NFTs, it's the Kotaku audience, which is broadly speaking hardcore gamers. Whereas I think you could argue that the overlap between those people and like Madden fans is not huge. So I wouldn't necessarily write all this off because they're taking I would expect Kotaku to be incredibly hostile to it, but I can see how there could be something here that makes some sense, as a way to bring, I have my super nice Nike, rare Nike NFTs. I can put them on my players in Madden or whatever, and they're using, the sort of the infrastructure of of blockchain as a way to do that. I can see it.
I guess
I am not like
I
jumping
mean,
out of bed.
to the artifact point. I mean, a majority of that 200 million generated by the Web3 unit of Nike is coming from
Artifacts
activities run by that company. Yep. And
yeah, right.
so definitely proven. But also they generated all that revenue during the peak of the hype, right? And I guess that's where my concern is kind of coming from. Like it's never a bad time.
Yeah, it's still not a good time. I mean, it's still not a good time to be doing.
Yeah.
I'm not like excited. I'm not excited about it, but I just think it's not quite as I'm trying to add a little context to the
totally. But like it's EA and Nike speak to like huge audiences, right? And these two games that they're also putting it into also speaks to very huge audiences. But the general perception right now about the space is everything is kind of fucked. So, and like no one really wants to like be getting in right now. My biggest concern is just timing, like why now? Like why did they think now is the best time to do it? But yeah. Oh yeah, I didn't have like a question for the group on this one because it was a quick update, but I don't know. I'm inviting any other thoughts also.
I think it makes a lot of sense if you take out the word NFT and think of it as digital merchandise and brand. And going with those things are obviously big in sports games, right? Like Madden and FIFA and stuff. So if you just think of it as like, if the headline was, EA does a deal with Nike for digital merchandise in their sports games, everyone will be like, well, yeah, obviously. And like, it's only the NFT word that sticks out there, right? Like, so if you just ignore that, but the thing is like, the NFT part maybe rubbed the hardcore gamers the wrong way, but obviously there is an audience, as David pointed out, for these things. And it's more like EA going like, well, we are like Nike already has some pull. This particular audience for the artifact stuff and the Web3 stuff does have some pull as well. Maybe it'll work out. Like we could try it, see if it pulls some gamers over. If not, we just don't do it again.
Yeah, they also didn't mention the term NFT in the whole announcement or anything, right? Like, and that was definitely very intentional at this point. But random side note. Thanks, David, for telling me how that company's name is pronounced, because like it was the hardest thing for me to remember, like I was thinking to myself while preparing, like, how the hell am I going to say this RTFKT, but it's good to know how it's said.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about Dolce and Gabbana at first, but no, it's Artifact.
Yeah, Artifact. Cool.
Well, in terms of Web3, we do have like another brief sort of interesting topic on Web3, which is SEC finally taking some bigger action here. Maybe a little late after given what happened with FTX, but it seems like maybe also a little responsive to that. Basically, two things happened recently, which is first off, SEC went after Binance, which was a much bigger thing, like in terms of this long, case document that they're going after them with, like lots of stuff, lots of accusations of a lot of bad activity coming out of Binance. Like it definitely seems a bit similar to FTX in a lot of ways, just a lot of accusations of the founder, CZ, doing stuff kind of sort of like what, we saw from Sam Bankman-Friedman, which is just a lot of moving money around, commingling stuff, hiding stuff, running stuff in a way that like is kind of backdooring things. And so there's a lot of accusation there. And of course, CZ's like public response is like, this is all BS. They're just going after me, like targeting me. And like the SEC is just kind of the enemy and they're just afraid of us and stuff like that. But the important part of this, I think, for the broader crypto landscape, besides just the potential to take down a big player in the space, is also wrapping in some game tokens to that, right? There's a lot of tokens being targeted as part of this. And so the ones that we kind of care about, it's spread across a few different areas, but the three that were gaming related were the Mana token for Decentraland, the Sand token for the Sandbox, and interestingly, Axie's governance token, AXS. And then there was also a couple of blockchain tokens like Polygon's Matic. There was Flow even wrapped in there, Solana's Sol, Algorand's Algo, Cardano's ADA, and then even like Filecoin and Internet Computers token. So like they kind of went a bit broad. And the suspicious part that people are kind of calling out is it was the exact same list as was approved for Hong Kong trading. So I don't know, maybe conspiracy theory out there.
That was approved for what?
I
Did
believe
you say
approved
that?
for trading or something along those lines in Hong
Okay.
Kong. At least that's the
Mhm.
comparison that's been brought up. There may be a little more depth to that. There may be not. It might just be people looking for some kind of connection. But it definitely is a little bit strange if it's like the exact same list being provided.
I mean,
Go ahead.
The thing is, the tokens you just mentioned, they all very obviously, to me anyway, they fail the Howey test, right? Like fail either fail or pass. I forget like which is which exactly, right? But like so the Howey test for is something a security is do people invest money in a common enterprise with the expectation of profits, and do the profits come from the efforts of others, right? Those are the four things. And if you hit those or hit any of those, actually, then you're then you're a security. And like taking AXS, right? If you I don't know if they've updated what AXS is supposed to do, but the premise was you buy AXS, and what you do, and as a holder of AXS, like the way the Axie economy works, or at least worked, was the profits are flowing to the holders of AXS. It is an unregistered security, so I don't think you need to be sort of that conspiratorial about it. It's just they are. And so
and I think the three gaming tokens are clearly that, right? Whereas like the other two are more just about land, like being the kind of investment vehicle. I think the thing that is a little more curious is the tokens that were meant for blockchain stuff or infrastructure stuff like Filecoin and Internet Computer, which I mean maybe they were pitched as investment vehicles, but I don't think a lot of people really look at, say, something like Matic as an investment vehicle so much as it is like the fuel of the system. Because if you're looking at Matic as an investment vehicle, then you start to look at Ethereum as one where it's like this is something to pay for gas and transactions and validation. And I mean, to be fair, just about everything passes the Howey test. It's more just like how much you want to consider that making it an actual security versus just passing that test, because that test is very vague, right? And so I question not necessarily
it's not it's not vague. Like here's literally, this is it. Like 1946 SEC versus WJ Howey Co. An investment contract for the purposes of the Securities Act means a contract, transaction, or scheme whereby a person invests his money in a common enterprise and is led to expect profits solely from the efforts of the promoter or third party, it being immaterial whether the shares in the enterprise are evidenced by, I won't give you the full thing, but the investors provide the capital and share in the earnings and profits. The promoters manage, control, and operate the enterprise. It follows that the arrangements whereby the investors' interests are made manifest involve... The test is whether the scheme involves investment of money in a common enterprise with profits to come solely from the efforts of others. If that test be satisfied, it is immaterial whether the enterprise is speculative or non-speculative, or whether there's a sale of property with or without intrinsic value.
And so yeah, I would say that like that is pretty broad though. Like it is specific and broad at the same time, in the sense that like making profits from the efforts of others, I think pretty much describes business in general, right? Like I get that in combination, a lot of that stuff can be a little more specific, but I mean that's that's also an argument for the lawyers and SEC and stuff like that. And I'm not a lawyer, but the breadth of the different types of tokens and the different types of use cases and stuff like that, that's where it makes me a little skeptical. But I do think that the gaming tokens, as you pointed out, they were rightfully pitched a lot more leaning towards the investment side, and maybe some of these blockchain tokens in their initial pitches were like, hey, own a part of this infrastructure, as opposed to like this is the fuel of the system. But I just wonder if like there's a reason why these were selected, not because of their specific uses, but because they were grouped in for another reason. Like maybe not the Hong Kong thing, but maybe there's a reason these were just easily lumped in, because obviously these ones also match a lot of other ones that aren't listed. And it's like, is this just the first opening, or is this just something that got pulled into the Binance case and isn't really necessarily super material to how the SEC moves forward after Binance, right? And I think that's what people are kind of concerned about, is like, is this the first opening shot from SEC, or is this like, this is just part of the Binance thing they're just dealing with, and like there may be a little fallout from it, but it doesn't mean the end of the crypto in general, because SEC goes after everything. And just to add a little color, there was another case side of this that is much less surprising or harsh around Coinbase as well, which is them basically saying, hey, Coinbase, you're supposed to be a registered security because of what you're doing is basically like, along these lines, and you should have registered. And then of course Coinbase's return is like, well, we asked you and you said it was fine, and like you were okay with this, and we pushed and we tried to, and you were just like, nah, and therefore that's why we didn't. Obviously, like, arguments for both sides, but I felt it was kind of interesting that sort of like Coinbase's response, as they've been a lot more vocal lately in general about the SEC, and I don't know, maybe they kind of invited it by that. They also had gotten a letter that they were kind of potentially going to be sued earlier on, so there was some warning there. But I'm kind of curious as well, like if you have some take on the Coinbase side of things, and if it even has any bearing on the other stuff. I'll take that as a no. It definitely seems like separate cases, just timed, back to back.
Yeah, I guess I don't have like too much to say on the Coinbase stuff, but on the game tokens kind of getting classified as securities, I mean, that's huge news, right? So does that? I mean, that kind of precedent basically means any Web3 game right now that is thinking about a token or has planned their roadmap with the token in it or has given out tokens to investors. I mean, does everyone need to backtrack right now? They need to like start checking, thinking about it again. Like, what are the investors going to do and such? Is there a way, like, maybe it's too early to say, but I mean, I guess what now all these tokens need to like register as securities or like what happens? But I mean, seeing AXS, I guess two things kind of shocked me. One is seeing these three tokens in that list, and the other thing that shocked me was Matic, which is Polygon's token, and Solana's token are there, but Ethereum and Bitcoin were not in that list. Maybe those are not. I don't know if they're. I guess they are traded on Binance also, but yeah, they didn't make it to the list, and I didn't really see. I don't understand why that was the case. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know, Devin. What do you think? Like, I mean, isn't this is like huge for the Web3 gaming space, right? Like, everything kind of changes.
Yeah, and I think that's the broader topic here. Is this is like we're already struggling in the Web3 space when it comes to investment money now. I think this just pretty much slams the brakes on it, right? Like if you were concerned at all about SEC enforcement of tokens and stuff like that, you're going to be looking at this and be like, maybe I should invest in AI or something else for the time being, and just kind of wait it out, right? I mean, they've been calling for regulation for a while, like Coinbase is, of all the companies, I feel like actually I would lean towards Coinbase has been overly trying to play ball for a while from my perception. And so I do think it's likely that there could have been miscommunication, but that they were probably trying to do things by the book. Whereas Binance, I think it seems to have clearly, in a lot of ways, dodged things and made some suspicious moves. And we really don't need another FTX kind of situation. So maybe this is actually for the best for the industry to kind of continue to clean it up. That's the SEC's job, right? Is to clean up bad actors to an extent to keep the space a little more fair. Don't always do the best job of it. It's a mixed bag, and this is of course a US centric move, right? This is not necessarily going to apply everywhere else. And this is mostly going to hit like Binance, like US, although they're accusing of like commingling between other enterprises in this as well. But like, I do think this is like maybe good long-term for crypto in terms of like cleaning stuff up, adding some regulation, adding some clarity, but bad short-term in terms of like pausing investments, getting people to be a little more skeptical and avoiding this, because we've also got Huuuge Labs was kind of being sniffed around because of course they're one of the big money makers in the space. And so it's like, does that come next, right? We had these two back to back. Is next week the case against Huuuge Labs, and the week after that maybe against Artifact? At that point, like we don't really know like where this is going from here, and that's the biggest problem. Is the SEC kind of leaves us guessing, and like that the fact that we're having to kind of guess right now.
Yeah, it kind of feels like a IDFA moment for the Web3 space, or maybe like at a scale like that, maybe 5x. Because I mean, my biggest question is what the hell happens to all the developers with the tokens who are planning tokens or who have tokens, at this point, like just the precedent that is now set with this. And
that's the thing is like
what happens to the developers?
They didn't say they're going after these tokens is the other thing though. Like they mentioned it, in as part of this. But they're going after Binance, not going after the tokens. And that's what I wonder is like, are they going to go after like the tokens, those enterprises is like, is Polygon as a company going to have to worry about this? Like that kind of stuff, I think is more of the open question. Or is this just like, hey, we're listing this as reasons why Binance was doing wrong things?
Yeah. But I guess we'll just need to like kind of keep track of it and see how it evolves. I mean, this
could be a watershed moment for Web3 either way, right? Like this could be a good or bad moment that kind of turns things, but definitely something to keep an eye on, I think, in terms of at least, obviously, like that's kind of an area I spend a lot of time in. So I'm definitely.
I don't think it's a good moment. I think it's hard to spin it as a good moment.
No, another one of my looking for the silver linings kind of things, right? Like I want to stay bullish on the space, the we're building period and everything like that, and maybe a little bit biased on looking for a positive here.
It's all digital collectibles and digital merchandise, guys. Don't worry about the Howey test. Yeah,
exactly. Lots of rebranding of how Web3 gets pitched, right? Because I think even David's kind of pointing that out, like that was part of the problem, is if you're pitching these as investments, like the way AXS was pitched as basically being shareholder value of the Axie treasury, like obviously a mistake to do that. I think that's clear, and I hope it sends that signal to the space. Like that's the part I think is good, is like to be like, hey, that's not a great idea. Let's probably not do that. And now you have some clarity on that. It's just where we go from here, I think, will be the big open question. But I think we did end up without enough time to necessarily get to every topic here, because there's so much interesting stuff happening, despite people thinking maybe that sometimes things slow down in the space. They never really truly do. But we definitely also want to make sure we get your guys' feedback here in the future as well. Like we've been getting some great emails to the mailbag at podcast@naavik.co. So make sure to keep sending those in, and we'll definitely try and get those going here on the air when we have the sort of relevant audience or research to be able to answer those thoroughly, as we did last time with the big Zelda question. So definitely keep sending those in. I want to thank, of course, all the panelists for taking their time out today. I think we proved that there's a lot of meat on these topics and a lot of different thoughts to have on them, different thought of angles, especially with David taking a bit of the contrarian approach today, which appreciate to keep things interesting. But definitely great to have you guys here as usual. And of course, thank you, listener, for tuning in. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. And of course, we look forward to seeing you all next week, and have a good weekend in the meantime.
If you enjoyed today's episode, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, or give a 5-star review. And if you want to reach out or provide feedback, shoot us a note at podcast@naavik.co or find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Plus, if you want to learn more about what Naavik has to offer, make sure to check out our website, www.naavik.co. There, you can sign up for the #1 games industry newsletter, Naavik Digest, or contact us to learn about our wide-ranging consulting and advisory services. Again, that is www.naavik.co. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.